In the meantime, some Nigerians have reacted to the ongoing negotiations between the federal government and the Nigeria Labour Congress, which have been deadlocked.
On the Labour House is the strike action. So they have no other option than to continue with the strike. But actually, minus and plus, what should be a lasting solution is how to give value to the Naira. Not in the number of amount you collect, but in how much that amount is able to purchase in the market. So the purchasing power is what matters. So whether they increase it to 1 million naira a month, the key thing is, do they even have the capacity to pay? If they does, why are they not even paying the ones that are on ground? So many governors have been said to be owing before now, arrears. So, and they are now talking of increments. For me, all these things are useless unless the government begin to think of how to stabilize the Naira by production. Our country don't like truth. They always want it the back way. If not, every one of them who goes outside the shores of this nation knows that the way we are going now is not how others does it. And as long as we are treading this path, we will never arrive at any meaningful conclusion.
When the masses are suffering, that government will know they hear and go here, because other external bodies will put eye on it. Are you getting me? Because you can't tell me that you will be paying someone a minimum wage of 30,000 naira, but a month only your transport have covered your salary. Are you getting me? Me, I'm not a salary earner. I'm not working for anybody. I'm working for myself. But I'm just pitying those people that is working under someone. Are you getting me? I pity them sometimes, because if you check, for instance, you're paying your house rent, your water bills, your electricity bills, even your transportation. What can 30,000 naira do for you?
When it comes to Nigerian government, I don't think there's any alternative. They don't listen to any better language than strike. Yes, because I believe when Tinubu government came into power at first, there are some rumors, and they say in any element of rumor, there's an element of truth, right? Yeah, so that they increase their own basic salaries and some things by 150%. So why, when it comes to the people who are suffering out there at the field, gathering the tax and all those things, when it comes to them to get their benefit, you are not helping? I think Labour should, if Nigerian government didn't do anything about it, they should just continue with the strike. I think that's just the best thing. They should shut down everywhere, even the National Assembly, everywhere. They just shut it down.
If government no really apply, make them take the strike on now, because you know how things is going in the country now. Government need to look into the labor condition and how situation of the country is going now. You understand? Donc they need to add the minimum wage for people to survive.
Well, Arise News analyst and lawyer Frank Tietie is here to look at this issue. Frank, good to see you, and thanks for your time as always. A lot of people have been talking about this. Now time for us, because Labour also kicked back and said, look, this pushback, it doesn't look like we're the one that are up in arms that you can now label as people causing trouble or treasonable felons. Let's speak to what constitutes treason by our statutes to start with before we come back to the issue of Labour and government.
Well, treason is when anybody takes up, levies war, takes up arms and carries out an act of war against Nigeria to the extent that the president of Nigeria becomes afraid. So it's critical that the president becomes afraid. I think what Labour is doing is not anywhere close to treason. Let's be honest with that. But something a bit falls within the borders of terrorism. So yes. But again, the same Terrorism Prevention Act saves Labour, because the act of disrupting supply of a critical national infrastructure that supplies power or electricity is no doubt an act of terrorism, as defined by the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022. But there is also a provision that excuses the fact that if it is done by citizens in furtherance of any form of protest, then it can be excused. But you see, but I think the government should be looking forward to implementing the various laws we had from the military times through to the times of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. There's sufficient laws that criminalize, strike actions, especially in the areas of essential services. Section 31 of the Trade Union Law, Amendment Law 2005, Amendment Act, I would say 2005, expressly prohibits any form of strike action by persons who are providing essential services. And if you really look at the definition of essential services under the provisions of the Trade Dispute Essential Services Act, it covers anybody who works for the local government of Nigeria, the state government of Nigeria, and the federal government. So strikes in Nigeria, the Nigerian economy, the Nigerian state is too fragile to take the kind of strike action where you shut down power. In fact, the economic importance of that cannot actually be quantified. In the many times I've observed such strike actions, especially by medical and health workers union or National Association of Resident Doctors, people just die, but they go unreported. And then in this case, when you shut down power, you are actually doing what an enemy of Nigeria would do. If Nigeria were at war, some kind of persons, even in humanitarian law, would not allow that infrastructures like water and power be disrupted for critical mass of the population. But if you do that, you're more or less carrying out an act of war against Nigeria. So in that case, the SGF may just be thinking that you are causing for the president to be afraid of his life.
Listening to you, it becomes too dicey. There's a thin line now. Listening
Very
to you
thin
now,
line.
there's
Very
a thin line.
Yes.
So at what point does Labour, in this case, because agitations will come, except you have parties who are always listening to each other and trying to see where they get a middle ground. So at this point in time, there's a thin line. You also spoke to another scary part, which government hasn't spoken about and Labour hasn't. And you said it tilts sometimes, if you're not too careful, towards terrorism.
Of course, yes.
Let's just patient, Frank. Let's open the books and talk more about these so that the two parties know where to draw the line.
Of course they know. We must have Nigeria.
Oh, they know.
Of course they know. We must have Nigeria. The parties who are clamoring, the people who are bringing this country to its knees at this time, they're not up to 5% of the population of Nigeria. The rest of Nigerians who don't have a voice, and I hope I can speak for them, are there. Some of them saying, oh, the strike should go on. The idea of underlying a strike and disrupting government services to the point that a country that is already on its knees, unable to fight terrorism, that is able to bring down the intractable situation of banditry and kidnapping across the country, you want to strike to. What you're directly saying is that you want to bring down the government, and this is not a parliamentary system of government where a king or a queen can say, okay, I'm calling for elections because the government has failed. When you have a failed government, you actually have a failed state, completely total disruption, worse than a civil war. Is that what you're calling for? People just don't know what they're talking about. And then when you are clamoring for pay rise, for goodness sake, it's as a result of the lack of innovation on the part of government. Should the government actually wait for its employees to start calling for minimum wage? Doesn't a government, especially a new government that is in terms and in touch with reality, should be the one advocating for a minimum wage? And a minimum wage is an act of law. So who is going to tell the National Assembly, are you going to take up their functions and so you want to make law?
In other words, you don't wait to be pushed before
you don't,
actually,
even though there are provisions of the
it.
law. This tripartite committee you see is actually a provision of the Minimum Wage Act. So whatever it is, when the National Assembly comes to the point and say, look, realistically speaking, this is what we can pay, you need to realize that it's the minimum wage actually is abysmal. And I'm in touch with security companies, private security guards companies that pay very, very ridiculous amount of money as minimum wage. They employ more than 50, so they all fall within the category of persons who should pay minimum wage. They don't pay. I know some of them, as we speak, that pay 80,000 naira, not even 30,000 naira. So of course, we should see enforcement in that regard. We haven't seen the successive ministers of labor actually enforcing the minimum wage standards that we have had, even according to the existing law.
In other words, Frank, that's a bigger trouble ahead, because with the 60,000 naira which the government has actually proposed to labor, by the way, they added 2,000, so yes. 62,000.
Yes.
The NGF came up with this release, specifically and categorically saying we cannot afford 60,000.
And I think that's honorable. There's no point agreeing to say you want to pay for political reasons and then don't pay. But they should take a cue from outgoing Governor Godwin Obaseki, who has now raised the minimum wage of Edo State workers to 70%, 70,000. Whether it is any form of political chicanery, we don't know. But you see, clearly, when the situation is not economically viable enough to pay that, it becomes a problem. But you see, do not excuse labor. Members of the NLC and Trade Union Congress, are they not complicit? Are they not part of the people who run government for the past 20 years or so that we've had a democracy? We have a collective, you see, we should all collectively own the failure that Nigeria has been. For goodness sake, our country has been badly governed. You don't expect, and I hate to be an apologist of this government, but you don't expect a country that is on its knees, that's been fighting troubles with terrorism, that is unable to beat terrorists in the northeastern part of this country, that is able to provide security, that has been badly run because of entrenched corruption, whether in the subsidy regime or other. You want the country, you want that administration that is about 1 year old to turn that around, and you give such kind of unrealistic demands and unrealistic terms and conditions. Of course, labor must come to terms that
so
that is not possible.
You just proclaimed a guilty verdict on all of us.
Of course, yes.
Myself inclusive. Every Nigerian. You say whether we like it or not.
This is our country. Of course, why are we advocates? Why do we do what we do on television? It is because we want a better country and we're not running away. And that's why we tell ourselves the truth. We are a badly run country because we're complicit. We're not speaking up enough. Who are those who run public corruption? Are they not in the federal public service?
Let me quickly throw this in.
Talking about?
Today, I saw a post, a bunch of plantain is almost 17,000 naira. And I said, wait a minute, this is not about the dollar. This is not about anything.
Yeah.
But for those for lovers of food stuff. So it comes back to us.
Yes,
I think you're making some big sense. So you look at some of the staples that has nothing to do with so many things that we're dealing with as a people. They're all up there.
No, you see, we're not running our country in such a manner that we want to preserve it. We are in a rat race to outwit one another, to out-exploit one another in this country. We're not running as if, look, this is where we'll live and die, and so let's preserve it for our children. We're not running like that. And so this strange competition, either between religions, either between ethnic groups, or between various groups, or between individuals, is going to run our country aground. And that's the mentality they've taken into government, where you don't care about your neighbor. That's why a government would not take initiative and say, look, workers, we need to increase your salary. This is unrealistic. I as president, I cannot remove subsidy and expect that you should remain on the same wage. The president didn't do that. He had to wait for Joe Ajero and his people to turn this country into something else, practically into a nightmare for 1 day, and then you expect now that they are disagreeing to continue to do that. Please don't even bother yourself to make another law. See, I'm a stickler to the fact that law is what it is. You see, the supremacy of the law must prevail. So if there is a law, the Trade Union Act, that outlaws strike, please, Joe Ajero and your people, do not go on strike if you provide essential services. You have not, as we speak, we do not yet have the records of those who have died as a result of shutting down power to the various hospitals. And the state of our health system is decrepit enough, in addition to now shutting down power, you are becoming an enemy of this country. And for goodness sake, do not turn the people of this country against the government. A government, however bad as it is, run by some of the worst persons you can think of, it does not have an alternative. The other alternative is anarchy. But we cannot put all this that we've done, or put all this effort, and then you want to bring it down with one kind of strike, because actually Joe Ajero and these people can run this country down, they can bring down a government, and for goodness sake, that shouldn't be your goal simply because you want a pay rise. Please, this country is, above that, and it's more important than that. We can have better ways of advocating and pushing and negotiating, even in diplomacy. Countries don't talk in this, this idea of ad bakalom, a contestation of force. If you don't do it, we will bring down this country. Countries don't do that, because if it is a contestation of force, we have a conflagration across the entire country, and that's why we have the UN. So we have rules of negotiation, and I think the NLC and Trade Union Congress are not doing very well, and the government utterly has failed. It's not taking responsibility. It is not taking initiative. I think we have people running our government who just lack innovation. They lack ability to really to tackle the situation, unfortunately.
Well, very unfortunate. And Frank, I'd like to thank you for your objective analysis here. Both sides need to go back and look inwards, and every Nigerian should also do the needful. And again, kudos to every establishment out there, every worker, entrepreneur, and CEO that has on their own, tweaked the salaries of their staff, which is quite commendable. We'd like to say well done.